Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight, we'll be exploring one of the most beneficial partnerships in human history, the bond between people and medicinal plants. Long before laboratories, long before pharmacies, and long before medicine came in pills, healing often began in our natural surroundings. In bark, roots, leaves, and seeds, people found substances that could soothe discomfort, calm the mind, fight infection, and even change the course of history. What makes this so fascinating is that plants were not designed to heal us. In fact, many of their beneficial chemicals evolved to do precisely the opposite. Plants are being shaped by their own struggle for survival, by balancing sunlight, and by fending off hungry insects, and by sheer chance, have made compounds that make human health possible. Somehow, again and again, humans learn to read those hidden chemistries and turn them into remedies, discoveries, and life-saving drugs. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your eyes to grow heavy. And let your thoughts drift as we uncover the secret wisdom of plants together. Let's begin. Many of humanity's oldest medicines began as leaves, roots, bark, and seeds. Long before chemists learned to isolate molecules, people were already reading the living world like a vast pharmacy. A bitter bark might ease fever. A soothing leaf might cool inflamed skin. A fragrant seed might settle a troubled stomach after a heavy meal. Across continents that never met, different cultures kept arriving at the same astonishing idea, that the plant world was full of hidden powers waiting to be noticed. That is what makes this story so gripping. Medicine did not begin under fluorescent lights. It began beside fires, along riverbanks, in mountain valleys, and in gardens carefully watched through the seasons. Every remedy was part experiment, part inheritance, and part courage. Someone had to taste, observe, remember, and teach. Out of that long chain of human attention came the first real medicines, drawn not from machines, but from the patient chemistry of the earth itself. Around the world, billions of people still rely on medicinal plants. This is not only an ancient story, it is a living one. In villages, cities, forests, and markets across the planet, plant medicine remains part of everyday life for an enormous number of people. In some places, it is the most available form of care. In others, it sits beside modern hospitals, trusted for certain problems because generations have seen it work. A grandmother brews ginger for nausea. A healer prepares bark for fever. A family reaches for peppermint, chamomile, or clove before anything from a pharmacy shelf. That scale is extraordinary. It means medicinal plants are not a forgotten chapter from the distant past. They are part of the present tense of human survival. And behind every plant remedy lies something even more remarkable, a body of knowledge carried by memory, practice, and observation, often without laboratories, yet refined across centuries by people paying very close attention to what healed and what harmed. A willow tree helped inspire one of the world's best-known painkillers. There is something almost magical in the idea that a common tree helped lead to aspirin. For centuries, people knew willow bark could ease pain and reduce fever. They did not know about salicin, or how the body would transform it after swallowing. They only knew that the tree seemed to hold relief inside its bark. Later, scientists followed that clue, studied the chemistry, and eventually developed acetylsalicylic acid, a more reliable and more convenient medicine that spread across the world. What makes this so fascinating is not only the science, but the path itself. A medicine cabinet staple can trace part of its story back to wet riverbanks and a tree moving in the wind. That connection collapses the distance between folk knowledge and modern pharmacology. It reminds us that some of the most famous drugs on Earth did not appear from nowhere. They began as human beings noticing that a tree could change suffering. The rosy periwinkle helped doctors fight some forms of childhood leukemia. At first glance, it does not look like a plant that could change the fate of children. It is small, ornamental, and easy to overlook, with neat flowers that seem better suited to a garden border than a hospital ward. Yet hidden inside this unassuming species were compounds that could disrupt cell division, a discovery that helped transform treatment for certain leukemias. That is one of the most stunning things about medicinal plants. Their outward appearance tells you almost nothing about their inner power. The rosy periwinkle was not dramatic. It did not advertise itself as a medical miracle. But once researchers studied it, they found chemistry potent enough to become part of life-saving cancer therapy. The emotional force of that story is hard to ignore. Somewhere between a flower bed and a laboratory bench, a humble plant became part of one of medicine's most difficult battles, proving that beauty and biological power can exist in the same quiet bloom. Foxglove gave medicine a powerful way to steady failing hearts. Few plants capture the double nature of medicine more vividly than foxglove. It is striking to look at, with tall spires of bell-shaped flowers, yet inside it lies chemistry so powerful that the line between remedy and danger becomes very thin. From this plant came compounds that helped doctors strengthen the contractions of weakened hearts, giving medicine a new tool at a time when treatment options were far fewer. That achievement was dramatic because it showed that a plant could act on one of the body's most vital rhythms with astonishing precision. But foxglove also came with a warning written into its very usefulness. Too much could be deadly. Too little could do nothing. It demanded knowledge, caution, and exactness. That tension makes the story unforgettable. In one flowering plant, nature offered both risk and rescue, and medicine learned a lesson it would never forget, that some of the most powerful healers are also powerful poisons. The opium poppy changed pain relief, surgery, and human history. Pain has always been one of humanity's oldest enemies, and the opium poppy altered that struggle in a profound way. From its latex came substances capable of dulling agony, with a force few other natural remedies could match. That changed more than comfort. It changed what medicine could attempt. Severe injuries, disease, and later surgical procedures became more bearable because this plant offered real relief where little else could. Yet the story is not simple triumph. The same power that made the poppy so important also made it dangerous, addictive, and entangled with trade, empire, conflict, and public misery. Few medicinal plants have shaped both medicine and history so deeply. That is why it remains so compelling. In one flower, delicate and almost fragile to the eye, humanity found a source of mercy and a source of catastrophe. It is a reminder that powerful medicine does not arrive as pure blessing. It arrives with consequences. Cinchona bark helped humanity battle malaria long before modern laboratories. Malaria once haunted enormous parts of the world with terrifying persistence, bringing cycles of fever, weakness, delirium, and death. Then bark from trees growing in South America offered something extraordinary, a way to fight back. Cinchona became prized because it contained quinine, a compound that could treat the disease and alter the balance between human beings and one of history's most relentless killers. Before microscopes revealed parasites in detail, before pharmaceutical manufacturing became global, this bark was already changing outcomes. That alone is astonishing. A tree growing on Andean slopes became central to survival in distant tropical regions across the planet. Armies, explorers, colonists, traders, and local communities all felt the impact of that chemistry. The story carries a sense of scale that is hard to overstate. One plant did not just ease symptoms. It reshaped where people could go, how they endured, and what became possible in places once ruled by fever and mosquitoes. Some medicinal plants heal at one dose and harm at another. That narrow edge between help and harm is one of the most gripping truths in this whole subject. People often imagine plants as naturally safe simply because they are natural, yet many of the most effective botanical remedies are powerful precisely because they act strongly on the body. A small amount may calm pain, lower a symptom, or support recovery. A larger amount may disturb the heart, overwhelm the liver, or poison the nervous system. This is not a flaw in plant medicine. It is part of what makes it real medicine. Strength always comes with consequences. Traditional healers understood this through hard-earned experience, which is why preparation, timing, plant part, and dosage mattered so much. The fascination comes from realizing how exact the relationship can be. A leaf or root does not care whether it saves or harms. It only carries chemistry. The difference often lies in knowledge, and that knowledge can be the difference between relief and disaster. Plants cannot run from danger, so they fight with chemistry. An animal can flee, hide, bite, or claw. A plant stays where it grows. That stillness seems passive until you realize what plants are doing instead. They manufacture extraordinary chemical defenses to repel insects, poison grazers, discourage infection, survive drought, and compete with neighboring plants. In other words, much of medicinal plant chemistry did not evolve for us at all. It evolved because a rooted organism needed weapons, warnings, shields, and signals. That makes the whole field feel almost thrilling. When humans discovered plant remedies, we were stepping into an ancient biochemical arms race and borrowing molecules forged by evolution for entirely different battles. Some numb pain, some alter mood, some kill parasites. Some affect the heart or the gut with startling precision. These compounds were shaped over immense stretches of time by pressure and survival. Every medicinal plant is carrying the record of that struggle, and when we use one, we are benefiting from nature's long war. Hidden inside ordinary greenery are molecules strong enough to change lives. That may be the most enchanting idea of all. A patch of leaves in a hedgerow, a flower in a pot, a root pulled from dark soil. Any of these can contain compounds capable of easing suffering, extending life, or launching entirely new branches of medicine. The outer appearance can be almost misleading. Plants look calm. They sway in sunlight. They seem familiar, decorative, even humble. Yet inside them are alkaloids, glycosides, terpenes, phenolics, and other molecules with effects dramatic enough to alter blood pressure, stop pain, fight infection, or slow the growth of cancer cells. Once you understand that, the plant world stops looking ordinary. It becomes charged with hidden significance. A field is no longer just green. It is a library of chemistry written in living tissue. And somewhere in that immense library, perhaps in a species not yet studied properly, there may still be compounds waiting to save lives, just as others already have. Ancient graves reveal that humans gathered healing plants tens of thousands of years ago. Some of the earliest clues in this story do not come from books or temples. They come from burial sites. In a few ancient graves, archaeologists have found traces of pollen and plant remains that suggest certain flowers and herbs may have been placed beside the dead, perhaps for ritual, perhaps for healing, perhaps for both. One of the most famous examples comes from Shanidar Cave, where pollen was once interpreted as evidence that Neanderthals may have selected medicinal plants. That claim is debated, which makes it even more intriguing. Even when the evidence is uncertain, the possibility is extraordinary. It hints that long before writing, long before agriculture, human relatives may already have noticed that some plants did more than fill the stomach. They soothed, protected, or symbolized recovery. If that instinct reaches back so far, then medicinal plant knowledge is not a side note in human history. It may be one of our oldest forms of attention. The world's first pharmacies were often gardens, forests, and market stalls. Before shelves of labeled bottles and climate-controlled dispensaries, medicine lived in places that smelled of soil, bark, oil, spice, and sun-dried leaves. A healer might step into a garden to gather what was needed that morning. A trader in a crowded market might know which roots eased cramps, which seeds freshened the breath, and which resin belonged in a wound dressing. Forest paths, mountain slopes, and riverside thickets all served as living inventories of possibility. That older form of pharmacy was not arranged by modern chemistry, yet it was organized by memory, season, and use. People knew when a bark should be stripped, when a flower should be dried, and when a root was strongest. The image is powerful because it reminds us that medicine once required direct intimacy with the landscape. To find relief, you needed to know where it grew, how it changed, and what part of it carried the power. Egyptian healers recorded plant remedies on papyrus thousands of years ago. One of the most thrilling moments in the history of medicine is realizing that some of its old instructions still survive in writing. In ancient Egypt, healers recorded remedies on papyrus, preserving treatments that linked plants with wounds, digestion, skin disease, parasites, and pain. The Ebers Papyrus is one of the great examples, a document packed with preparations involving castor oil, garlic, aloe, juniper, and many other natural substances. Reading about these remedies now feels like overhearing a civilization trying to organize the living world into medicine. These were not random guesses scribbled in the dark. They were attempts to collect experience, compare outcomes, and pass practical knowledge forward. That is what makes them so captivating. Across more than 3,000 years, you can still sense the urgency behind them. People were sick, people were frightened, and other people were searching fields and riverbanks for anything that might help keep the body together a little longer. Traditional Chinese medicine preserved vast plant knowledge across many centuries. One of the great wonders of medicinal plant history is not only discovery, but preservation. In China, plant knowledge was gathered, refined, debated, recorded, and handed forward across an immense span of time. Texts such as the Shenan Bencao Jing and later the Bencao Gangmu did more than list remedies. They built entire frameworks for understanding preparation, taste, temperature, effect, and compatibility. That means plants were not treated as isolated curiosities. They were woven into a deeply developed medical tradition with its own logic and structure. Ginseng, licorice, ephedra, cinnamon twig, and many others were studied not only for what they did, but for how they interacted within larger formulas. That continuity is astonishing. While kingdoms rose and fell, this body of knowledge kept growing. It became a living archive of observation, argument, and practice. Few traditions on Earth have preserved botanical medicine with such scale, discipline, and historical depth. Ayurveda built whole healing systems around the properties of plants. In the Ayurvedic tradition, plants were never just ingredients. They were part of a whole vision of balance, constitution, digestion, energy, and long-term health. That is what makes the tradition so compelling. It did not simply ask whether a leaf or root worked. It asked who it suited, when it should be used, how it should be prepared, and what larger pattern in the body it was meant to address. Turmeric, ashwagandha, neem, holy basil, triphala, and countless others were drawn into a medical system that connected daily life with healing. Food, sleep, routine, environment, and herbs all belonged to the same conversation. That broader frame gave medicinal plants a kind of narrative life. They were not swallowed in isolation. They were combined, warmed, steeped, mixed with fats or honey, and matched to the person receiving them. The result was a botanical tradition that felt less like a cabinet of remedies and more like a complete map of care. Indigenous knowledge has guided many major discoveries in modern medicine. Again and again, modern researchers have reached important medical discoveries by first listening to people who already knew where to look. Indigenous communities across the world built close, detailed knowledge of local plants through generations of observation, trial, seasonal practice, and cultural memory. That knowledge has guided the search for compounds used in pain relief, fever treatment, infection control, and much more. The striking thing is how often science arrived later to confirm that a traditional remedy really did contain strong biological activity. That does not mean every inherited use becomes a modern drug, but it does show how deeply human insight can grow when people live in sustained relationship with one place for a very long time. The lesson is larger than medicine. It is about attention, respect, and survival. Forests, deserts, mountains, and wetlands became classrooms, and in many of those classrooms, indigenous knowledge holders were making pharmacological observations long before laboratories could explain them. A single forest can hold thousands of chemical recipes humans have never tested. Walk into a forest and it may seem, at first, like a simple abundance of trunks, leaves, vines, and shade. But chemically, it is closer to an immense unread library. Each species is making its own molecules. Each leaf may hold defenses against insects. Each root may interact with fungi, microbes, and neighboring plants through compounds humans have never isolated. Some trees produce resins that harden like armor. Some shrubs make alkaloids that affect nerves and muscles. Some flowers hide volatile chemicals that lure pollinators while repelling attackers. The staggering truth is that only a fraction of this biochemical richness has been properly explored. In one forest, there may be thousands of distinct compounds that no one has tested for antibacterial activity, anti-inflammatory effects, cancer relevance, or neurological potential. That possibility is thrilling. It means that a woodland is not only an ecosystem. It is a reservoir of molecular invention, filled with solutions evolution has already drafted, waiting for human beings to learn how to read them. The same plant may act differently depending on soil, weather, and season. It is tempting to think of a medicinal plant as a fixed thing, almost like a factory product. But living plants do not work that way. A herb gathered after heavy rain may not match the chemistry of the same species collected after drought. Soil minerals can alter growth. Sunlight can shift the production of protective compounds. Cold nights, insect pressure, altitude, and the timing of harvest can all leave their mark. That makes medicinal plants far more dynamic than many people imagine. The plant is the same species, yet its inner chemistry can move with circumstance. For healers and growers, this mattered enormously. It is one reason careful traditions paid attention to place and season, rather than treating every specimen as interchangeable. It also explains why modern standardization is so difficult. Nature does not mass-produce identical batches. It produces living variation. That variation is fascinating because it means medicine begins long before preparation. It begins in weather, ground, and the passing shape of a year. Sunlight, Insects and drought can all change a plant's medicinal chemistry. A plant under pressure does not simply endure. It responds. Bright light can increase the production of protective pigments and antioxidants. Insect attack can trigger bitter or toxic defenses that were barely present before. Drought can concentrate certain chemicals as the plant struggles to conserve water and survive. This is one of the most astonishing things about botanical medicine. The chemistry is not static. It can intensify as the plant fights its own battles. In some cases, the very compounds humans prize most highly are part of those emergency responses. A medicinal plant may become chemically richer, not in comfort, but under stress. That means a field in a dry summer may yield a different medicine from the same field after a mild, wet season. It also means that when humans use medicinal plants, we are often benefiting from the record of hardship written into their tissues. The remedy may exist because the plant was tested first by sun, teeth, hunger, and thirst. Some healing compounds exist only because plants evolved to deter predators. There is a strange beauty in this reversal. What humans call medicine often began as defense. A compound that numbs, burns, repels, poisons, or confuses an attacking insect may later become a useful treatment in human hands. The plant was not trying to heal anyone. It was trying not to be eaten. Over millions of years, that pressure pushed plants to invent remarkable chemistry. Some substances interfere with muscles. Some alter digestion. Some target microbes. Some disrupt growth in other organisms nearby. From the plant's point of view, these are survival tools. From our point of view, they can become painkillers, anti-parasitic drugs, stimulants, or life-saving therapies. That is what makes medicinal plants feel almost paradoxical. Human healing often depends on compounds shaped by struggle and danger. We are borrowing from a chemical battlefield. The more you understand that, the more fascinating the whole subject becomes. Medicine is not always born from kindness in nature. Sometimes it is born from resistance. Bitter taste often signals that a plant is chemically active. Bitterness has always carried a warning, and not without reason. Many plant compounds that strongly affect the body taste sharp, astringent, or deeply bitter because they evolved to discourage animals from chewing further. Alkaloids, flavonoids, terpenes, and other active substances often announce themselves to the tongue before they reveal themselves to the bloodstream. That made bitterness important in traditional healing. It was not just a flavor. It was a clue. A bitter plant might stimulate digestion, repel parasites, alter appetite, or carry far stronger properties that required caution. Of course, bitter does not always mean medicinal, and pleasant-tasting plants can also be powerful. But the pattern is striking enough to have shaped entire traditions. Humans learned to associate certain tastes with potency long before the chemistry was named. There is something wonderfully direct about that. The body itself became an instrument of detection. One taste, and suddenly a leaf or bark no longer seemed inert. It seemed charged with intention. A medicinal plant's strongest chemicals may hide in bark, not flowers. Flowers draw the eye, which makes them easy to admire and easy to assume are the important part. Yet in many medicinal species, the real power is hidden deeper, in the bark that protects the living tissues beneath. Bark is where a tree or shrub often stores compounds that defend against fungi, boring insects, grazing animals, and physical injury. Those defenses can be intense. Cinchona bark carried quinine. Willow bark held the ancestors of aspirin's story. Cinnamon bark became treasured not just for flavor, but for its aromatic chemistry. The fascination comes from contrast. The outer trunk may seem rough, plain, almost inert, while the showy petals get the attention. Yet the bark may be the true chemical fortress. For generations, healers understood this through practice. They stripped, dried, shaved, and boiled bark because experience taught them that the medicine was there. A tree, then, is not only beautiful overhead, it may also be medicinal in the protective skin it wears around itself. Roots often store very different compounds from the leaves above. A plant is not chemically uniform from top to bottom. The part waving in sunlight may have one purpose, while the part pushing through darkness below may have another entirely. Roots absorb water, anchor the plant, interact with soil microbes, and store reserves, so their chemistry often reflects those tasks. That is why roots can smell different, taste different, and act differently from stems or leaves of the same species. Ginger and turmeric are famous examples, though what we use is technically a rhizome rather than a true root. Ginseng root became legendary because its subterranean chemistry gave it a distinct role in traditional medicine. The deeper lesson is what makes this so captivating. A plant is more like a city than a single object. Different districts do different work. That means knowledge had to become very precise. It was never enough to know the species. You needed to know the part. In medicinal plants, the wrong section could be useless, while the right one changed everything. Seeds can contain concentrated defenses powerful enough to become medicine. A seed is a package of concentrated future. It carries the embryo of a new plant, the nutrients to support its first steps, and often a ring of chemical protection because that tiny capsule is highly valuable and highly vulnerable. If animals, fungi, or insects consume it too easily, the plant loses its next generation. So seeds often come armed. Some contain oils, aromatic compounds, alkaloids, or glycosides strong enough to affect digestion, nerves, circulation, or microbes. That is one reason so many important medicinal and culinary seeds feel potent even in small amounts. Fennel, cardamom, psyllium, nutmeg, castor, and mustard each show a different side of that story. What makes seeds so fascinating is their compression of power. They are small enough to spill through your fingers, yet inside them lies a blend of stored energy and chemical strategy. In some cases, that strategy protects the seed. In human hands, it becomes remedy, stimulant, laxative, or medicine. Resin, sap, and latex are often part of a plant's chemical arsenal. When a plant is cut, what leaks out can tell you a great deal about how it survives. Sticky resin can seal a wound and trap invading insects. Milky latex can deter grazers with bitterness or toxins. Aromatic sap may carry antifungal compounds that protect damaged tissue before rot takes hold. These fluids are not passive plant blood. They are active defenses, and in many cases, humans learned to use them. Frankincense and myrrh became prized resins. Pine resins found roles in salves and liniments. Opium latex from the poppy changed pain relief forever. Aloe's inner leaf gel and bitter outer exudate reveal how even one plant can separate soothing tissue from harsher chemistry. The drama of this subject lies in how immediate it feels. A wound opens in the plant, and within seconds, chemistry answers. That response can harden, sting, preserve, or poison. Nature does not wait. It deploys a liquid defense, and sometimes that defense becomes part of human medicine. A crushed leaf can release compounds that were locked away moments earlier. One of the most vivid things about medicinal plants is how quickly chemistry can appear when structure is broken. A leaf may seem mild until it is torn, bruised, or crushed between the fingers. Then suddenly a sharp scent rises, bitterness spreads, or a cooling sensation emerges. That happens because many plants keep ingredients stored in separate compartments until damage brings them together. Cells rupture, enzymes meet new molecules, and fresh compounds are produced almost instantly. Mint releases aromatic oils. Garlic forms allicin only after crushing. Mustard family plants can generate pungent defenses when their tissues are broken. This is thrilling because it means the medicine is not always fully present in the intact plant. Sometimes it is activated by action. Preparation becomes part of the chemistry itself. Pound a leaf, grind a clove, bruise an herb, and you are not just making it easier to use. You are changing what it is, unlocking hidden reactions in real time. Some plant compounds only appear after the plant is wounded. Plants do not simply contain defenses. They can manufacture new ones in response to injury. When an insect chews a leaf or a stem is pierced, the plant may begin an emergency chemical program, sending signals through its tissues and switching on pathways that were quiet moments earlier. Fresh toxins, repellents, or antimicrobial compounds can then rise in damaged areas or even spread to distant parts of the plant. In other words, a wounded plant may become chemically different from the same plant in peace. That is an extraordinary idea. It means the medicinal value of a specimen can depend not only on species and season, but on its recent history of attack. The plant remembers danger in chemistry. For humans, this opens a fascinating window into the intelligence of living systems. A rooted organism with no brain still senses damage, communicates internally, and changes its molecular strategy. Sometimes the compounds we later use first existed as part of that emergency response. Drying a medicinal herb can strengthen, weaken, or transform its effects. Drying sounds simple, almost boring, until you realize how much it can change. As water leaves a plant, enzymes continue working for a time. Volatile oils begin to shift, delicate compounds may degrade, and other constituents can become more concentrated by sheer loss of moisture. That means drying is not just preservation, it is transformation. In some herbs, the process stabilizes useful chemistry and makes storage possible for months. In others, it dulls the very compounds that made the fresh plant distinctive. A leaf that smelled vivid in the field may become softer and more rounded after drying. Another may grow harsher, stronger, or more bitter. Traditional healers often knew exactly which plants should be used fresh and which improved after hanging in shade or sun. That old knowledge was practical chemistry in action. It recognized that time and air are active partners in medicine. The harvested herb keeps changing, and sometimes that change makes all the difference. Oiling a plant can pull out chemicals that chewing never would. Heat changes access. When bark, root, seed, or leaf is simmered in water, tough cell walls begin to soften, compounds dissolve that might otherwise stay trapped, and the liquid becomes a carrier for chemistry the mouth alone could never fully reach. That is why decoctions and infusions became so important in healing traditions across the world. A person chewing bark might get one experience. A pot of that same bark boiled slowly over a fire could produce something much deeper, richer, and more effective. This is especially true for dense plant parts such as roots and woody stems, where the medicine is held behind layers nature built for strength and defense. Boiling also changes texture, taste, and absorption, making some remedies easier to swallow and easier to distribute in the body. There is something beautiful about the simplicity of it. Add water, add heat, wait, and hidden chemistry moves outward, turning a plant into a drinkable form of concentrated possibility. Fermentation can change plant remedies into something entirely new. Once microbes enter the story, plants can become chemically transformed. Fermentation breaks down sugars, reshapes bitter compounds, creates new acids and aromas, and sometimes makes certain constituents easier for the body to absorb. In other cases, it reduces harmful substances that made the raw plant harder to use safely. This is why fermentation has held such an important place in food and medicine alike. Tea can be fermented. Soy, herbs, roots, and fruit can all be altered by microbial work. Even traditional medicinal wines and tonics often depended on these transformations. What makes this so fascinating is that the plant is no longer acting alone. Bacteria and fungi become silent partners, rewriting part of its chemistry. The result can taste different, smell different, and behave differently in the body. A raw remedy and a fermented remedy may belong to the same species, yet they can feel like entirely separate medicines. Time, microbes, and plants together can create something neither could make alone. Tea, tincture, poultice, and smoke each deliver plant compounds differently. How a plant enters the body can matter almost as much as the plant itself. A tea draws water-soluble compounds into liquid, which makes it useful for soothing the throat, the stomach, or the nerves. A tincture uses alcohol, which can pull out a different range of chemicals and preserve them for much longer. A poultice places the plant directly against the skin, where warmth and moisture can help local effects reach a sore joint, a rash, or a wound. Smoke works differently again. It carries volatile compounds through the lungs and into the bloodstream with startling speed. That means one herb can behave like several different medicines depending on preparation. The transformation is almost theatrical. Leaves in a jar, leaves in hot water, leaves on the skin, and leaves in smoke are not the same experience. Traditional healing systems understood this deeply. They were not just choosing a plant. They were choosing a route, a pace, and a destination. Two plants that look alike can have completely different medical effects. Nature can be dangerously deceptive. Two herbs may share the same leaf shape, the same flower color, and the same general habit of growth. Yet one may soothe a complaint, while the other can poison with terrifying speed. That is why medicinal plant knowledge has always required precision. Eyeballing the overall look is not enough. You need to notice the scent when the leaf is crushed, the pattern of veins, the structure of the root, the time of year it appears, and the exact arrangement of the flowers. Entire traditions of herbal medicine were built on that kind of attention because mistakes had consequences. Hemlock and edible relatives from the carrot family have caused fatal confusion. Wild garlic and toxic lookalikes have done the same. What makes this so compelling is that it turns a field walk into a test of perception. The natural world rewards careful seeing. In medicinal plants, one small visual error can separate healing from real danger. Some of the deadliest poisons known also shape the history of medicine. The boundary between poison and medicine has never been neat. In fact, some of the most feared plant toxins helped teach medicine how powerful chemistry could become when used with knowledge and restraint. Strychnine, aconite, hemlock, and other notorious poisons terrified people because of what they could do to muscles, nerves, and the heart. Yet these same substances, or compounds inspired by them, forced physicians and chemists to study dose, mechanism, and control with far greater care. Once you can see how a toxin grips the body, you begin to understand how the body works at all. That is one reason poisonous plants left such a deep mark on medical history. They were not only threats, they were brutal teachers. They revealed how fast a molecule could act and how precisely it could target living systems. In that sense, the dark side of plant chemistry helped open the door to some of medicine's most important insights. deadly nightshade and gentle chamomile both belong to the same vast kingdom. One of the most astonishing truths about medicinal plants is that tenderness and danger can exist side by side in the same natural world. On one hand, there is chamomile, long loved for teas that settle the stomach and ease people toward rest. On the other, there is deadly nightshade, a plant whose chemistry can distort vision, disturb the heart, and cause fatal poisoning. They are both plants, both built from sunlight, water, minerals, and time, yet the human experience of them could hardly be more different. That contrast reveals something essential. The plant kingdom is not mild by default. It is chemically wild, varied, and often extreme. A meadow is not just beautiful. It is full of substances with radically different effects on the body. That is what makes this topic feel so alive. The same green world that comforts us with herbal tea also contains compounds capable of terrifying power, sometimes only a short walk away. Yew trees contain compounds that became important weapons against cancer. Few trees look more calm and ordinary than a yew. They stand in churchyards, gardens, and old landscapes with an air of permanence, dark-needled and almost solemn. Yet inside that quiet tree, scientists found compounds that could interfere with cancer cell division in a way medicine desperately needed. Taxanes, including paclitaxel and related drugs, became major tools in treating several cancers because they target the machinery cells used to separate and multiply. That is a breathtaking discovery when you pause over it. A tree, often associated with cemeteries and old silence, ended up offering life-prolonging treatment to countless patients. The symbolism alone is striking, but the biology is even more so. Cancer is one of the most difficult medical problems humans face, and part of the answer came from deep within the tissues of a conifer. The lesson lands with force. Even the most familiar tree may be hiding chemistry powerful enough to alter modern medicine. Pacific yew was once overlooked as a useless forest tree. For a long time, the Pacific yew was not admired the way larger timber species were. It was small, slow-growing, and often treated as a minor tree of little economic value in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. That is what makes its story so dramatic. Hidden inside a species many people ignored was chemistry that would later help treat cancer. Once researchers identified paclitaxel in its bark, the tree's status changed overnight from overlooked understory species to biological treasure. It is hard to imagine a better example of nature confounding human judgment. We tend to notice what is big, useful, and easy to sell. The Pacific yew did not fit that picture, so it was dismissed. Yet it turned out to be carrying one of the most important anti-cancer compounds ever discovered in a plant. That reversal is unforgettable. A tree once treated as almost worthless became proof that value in nature is often hidden until science finally learns how to ask the right question. Autumn crocus gave medicine colchicine, a treatment for gout. Gout is one of the oldest recorded diseases, famous for sudden, searing pain that can make even the weight of a blanket unbearable. Long before modern drug shelves, a striking plant called autumn crocus offered relief through a compound now known as colchicine. What makes this story so fascinating is how specific that effect is. The plant does not simply dull pain in a vague way. Its chemistry interferes with inflammatory processes linked to the crystal-driven attacks of doubt. That precision gives the whole subject a sense of wonder. A flower rising from the soil in autumn, delicate and elegant to the eye, contains molecules capable of changing one of medicine's classic agonies. Yet the plant also reminds us how narrow the safe path can be. Its chemistry is potent and not forgiving. That tension makes the discovery memorable. In one small flowering species, beauty, danger and therapeutic accuracy all meet in the same remarkable package. Madagascar periwinkle carries molecules that can disrupt runaway cell division. Cancer becomes so dangerous because cells stop obeying the ordinary limits of growth. They divide when they should not, multiply when they should stop, and turn the body's own tissues against itself. Inside the Madagascar periwinkle, researchers found compounds that could interrupt that terrible momentum by interfering with the machinery cells used to divide. That is astonishing because cell division is one of the deepest processes in life itself. To affect it is to reach into the most intimate mechanics of biology. The plant was not built to treat human disease, yet its chemistry proved capable of altering one of medicine's hardest battles. The power of that discovery lies not only in its clinical impact, but in its scale of surprise. A decorative flower from a distant island helped open a route into modern cancer therapy. Once again, the garden and the hospital were linked by a thread of chemistry no one could have guessed by appearance alone. Sweet wormwood gave the world artemisinin, a vital anti-malarial drug. Malaria has shaped empires, migrations, war, and survival across huge parts of human history. So any real advance against it matters on a vast scale. From sweet wormwood came artemisinin, a compound that became one of the most important anti-malarial drugs in the modern era. The story is especially captivating because it joined traditional knowledge with modern science in a way that changed global health. Researchers searching for better treatments turned to an ancient Chinese medicinal plant, refined the extraction process, and uncovered something extraordinary. Artemisinin acts quickly against malaria parasites and became central to life-saving combination therapies used around the world. That means the chemistry of one herb reached far beyond local practice and into international medicine. The sweep of that journey is stunning. A plant once gathered and prepared in traditional settings ended up helping millions of people survive a disease that has haunted humanity for ages. Few medicinal plants can claim an impact that large. Garlic has been valued as both food and remedy for millennia. Garlic is one of those rare plants that crosses the line between kitchen and medicine so completely that the two roles almost seem inseparable. It flavors meals, yet for thousands of years people have also turned to it for infections, circulation, wounds, and general vigor. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and many later cultures all gave it a medical role, which already makes it impressive. But the real fascination lies in what happens when a clove is crushed. Enzymes spring into action and create allicin along with other sulfur-rich compounds that help explain garlic's sharp smell and some of its biological effects. Suddenly, the familiar bulb becomes far more interesting. It is not only seasoning. It is a packet of reactive chemistry waiting for damage to unlock it. That combination of everyday familiarity and hidden power makes garlic unforgettable. One of the world's most common ingredients is also one of its oldest medicinal companions, carried through history on breath and memory. Ginger has soothed nausea across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. Some remedies become globally beloved because people who never met kept discovering the same thing. Ginger is one of the best examples. In Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and the Americas, people have reached for it to calm nausea, warm the body, and settle uneasy digestion. That repeated return is compelling because it suggests something deeper than fashion. Whether taken as tea, chewed fresh, cooked into broth, or mixed into other preparations, ginger has followed human travel routes for centuries as both spice and remedy. Modern research has helped explain part of the picture, but the cultural pattern came first. Sailors used it. Pregnant people used it. Families kept it on hand for stomach trouble long before drugstore anti-nausea tablets existed. Its appeal also has a sensory drama to it. Ginger feels active. It is hot, bright, and alive in the mouth. You can almost believe from the first taste that something useful is beginning. Peppermint can relax muscles in the gut and ease discomfort. Peppermint feels simple until you look more closely. Its scent is bright, its taste is cooling, and it seems almost too familiar to be medically interesting. Yet the compounds in peppermint oil, especially menthol, can influence smooth muscle in the digestive tract and help ease certain kinds of cramping and discomfort. That gives the plant a kind of hidden elegance. Relief comes not from a heavy sedative effect, but from a targeted shift in the behavior of the gut itself. There is also a sensory dimension that makes peppermint memorable. The cooling sensation it creates is not actual cold, but the activation of receptors that trick the nervous system into perceiving cold. So the plant is working on several levels at once: chemistry, muscle, and sensation. That layered action helps explain its long life in herbal traditions and modern preparations alike. A mint leaf, then, is not just refreshing. It is a small lesson in how subtle plant medicine can be. Turmeric's golden color comes from compounds studied for inflammation. Turmeric has the visual confidence of few medicinal plants. Its color is so intense that it seems almost unreal, staining fingers, cloth, and cooking pots with a deep golden glow. That vivid pigment comes largely from curcuminoids, compounds that have attracted enormous scientific interest for their possible anti-inflammatory effects and broader biological activity. What makes turmeric so captivating is that it sits at the intersection of food, ritual, and medicine. It has colored meals, cosmetics, and ceremonial traditions for centuries, yet it also carries chemistry serious enough to fill laboratories and research papers. The golden powder looks warm and comforting, but beneath that familiar appearance lies a complex pharmacological puzzle involving absorption, metabolism, and multiple possible pathways in the body. That dual nature gives it real narrative force. A spice on the shelf becomes a subject of global scientific study. Something that brightens a curry may also be part of a much larger medical conversation. Aloe stores soothing gel inside leaves built for desert survival. Aloe's medical reputation begins with an engineering miracle. In dry climates where water is precious, the plant builds thick leaves that function like reservoirs, holding moisture inside a cool, translucent gel. That gel is part survival strategy, yet humans learn to use it for burns, irritation, and damaged skin. The appeal is immediate because the substance itself feels like relief. It is cool, slick, and almost luminous when the leaf is cut open. There is something deeply satisfying in the idea that a plant designed to endure heat and drought also offers comfort to heat-damaged human skin. But aloe is more interesting than a simple household remedy. The leaf contains different layers with different chemistry, including bitter outer substances, but can have very different effects from the inner gel. So even this familiar plant carries complexity. Under its calm appearance sits a small desert laboratory, storing water, guarding itself, and offering a form of soothing medicine born from survival in harsh conditions. Licorice root tastes sweet because of a powerful active compound. Licorice is one of the great surprises of medicinal plants because its sweetness does not behave like ordinary sugar. The root contains glycyrrhizine, a compound far sweeter than sucrose and biologically active in ways that go far beyond flavor. That makes the plant fascinating from the first taste. It enters the mouth like a treat, then reveals itself as something more complicated, a root with real effects on the body and a long history in coughs, throat preparations, digestive remedies, and traditional pea formulas. But the sweetness comes with a warning. Taken in large amounts or over time, licorice can influence blood pressure and mineral balance in ways that show just how medically active it really is. That tension gives the root its power as a story. A sweet taste invites trust. The chemistry demands respect. It is a perfect example of how a plant can disguise pharmacological strength beneath something as comforting and familiar as sweetness. Ginseng became famous because people believed its root resembled the body. Sometimes a plant becomes important not only because of what it does, but because of what people think they see in it. Ginseng roots often fork into forms that resemble a torso and limbs, and that resemblance fed the old belief that the plant had a special relationship with the whole human body. In many traditions, this kind of visual symbolism mattered. It suggested that form revealed function. Whether or not that idea caused the plant's fame, it certainly helped surround ginseng with mystery, value, and reverence. Over time, it became associated with vitality, endurance, recovery, and prestige, especially in East Asian medical traditions. The root was gathered, traded, protected, and sometimes over-harvested because demand grew so intense. That social history is part of what makes it gripping. Ginseng is not just a herb. It is a plant onto which humans projected hope, symbolism, and deep desire for strength. Few medicinal roots have inspired such fascination across centuries. Echinacea rose to popularity as a plant linked with immune defense. Echinacea's journey into fame is a story of movement between indigenous knowledge, popular herbalism, and modern commercial enthusiasm. Native peoples in North America used species of Echinacea in several ways, and later settlers and practitioners helped spread its reputation more widely. By the late 19th and 20th centuries, it had become strongly associated with supporting the body during colds and infections, eventually turning into one of the most recognizable herbal supplements in the grass world. That rise is fascinating because it shows how a medicinal plant can travel from prairie ecology into global consumer culture. Purple coneflower is visually striking, yet its fame rests less on beauty than on the idea that it helps mobilize the body's own defenses. Whether taken as tea, tincture, tablet, or extract, it came to symbolize immune support for millions of people. That symbolic power matters. Echinacea did not just become a remedy. It became a cultural shorthand for resilience. St. John's wort became famous for its effects on mood. Among medicinal plants, few have sparked as much public discussion about mood as St. John's wort. For generations, it was used in European traditions, often gathered around midsummer, when its yellow flowers seemed almost to glow in strong sunlight. Later, it became widely known for its potential role in mild to moderate depression, which gave it a special place in conversations that usually belonged to prescription medicine. That shift is what makes the plant so intriguing. A flowering herb from roadsides and meadows suddenly entered a deeply modern question: how chemistry shapes emotion. Its story also carries an important lesson about complexity. The plant can interact with other medicines in serious ways because it influences how the body processes certain drugs. So it is never a trivial herb simply because it is botanical. In St. John's wort, folklore, psychiatry, sunlight, and pharmacology all meet. It is a reminder that mental life, too, can be touched by the chemistry of plants. Valerian root has long been used to encourage sleep and calm. Valerian does not win people over with beauty. Its flowers are modest, and the root has a famously pungent smell that many find earthy, musky, or frankly strange. Yet for centuries, people kept turning to it when rest would not come. That persistence is what makes it interesting. A plant does not remain in sleep traditions across so many regions simply because it is pleasant. It remains because generations noticed something worth keeping. Valerian became associated with easing tension and supporting sleep, often in teas, tinctures, and later capsules meant for the anxious or the wakeful. Its story also reveals something important about medicinal taste and smell. Useful plants are not always charming. Sometimes they announce their seriousness by being difficult. The root feels ancient in that way, almost like something pulled from deep earth rather than a polished modern product. In a restless world, valerian earned its place by offering one of the most desired gifts in medicine, the ability to let go. Hawthorn earned a reputation as a traditional ally of the heart. Hawthorn has one of the most beautiful reputations in herbal medicine because it connects a thorny hedgerow tree with one of the softest human hopes, protection of the heart. Its berries, leaves, and flowers were used in European traditions and later beyond, gradually becoming associated with circulation and cardiac support. Part of the fascination lies in the symbolism. A plant known for sharp thorns and spring blossom somehow became linked with the body's central rhythm, the organ most people feel as the seat of life and emotion alike. But the story is not only poetic. Hawthorn contains compounds such as flavonoids and oligomeric procyanidins that helped sustain interest in its cardiovascular effects. That combination of symbolism and chemistry gives it unusual depth. It feels at once folkloric and clinical. In old hedges and scrubby borders, a humble tree carried a reputation that reached into medicine's most intimate territory. Few plants have been asked to stand closer to the heartbeat than hawthorn. Milk thistle became closely associated with protecting the liver. Milk thistle has one of the most distinctive looks in herbal medicine, with white marbling on its leaves and a spiny boldness that makes it hard to ignore. Yet its real fame comes from the seeds, which contain a complex mixture known as silymarin. Over time, that chemistry made the plant closely linked with liver support, especially in traditions and studies focused on protection from toxins and stress. That reputation gives the plant unusual gravity because the liver is one of the body's great unseen workers, filtering blood, processing chemicals, and helping keep the inner world stable. When people speak of this herb, they are usually speaking of defense, resilience, and recovery in one of the body's most burdened organs. There is something compelling about that image. A thorny plant from dry ground becomes associated with shielding the body's silent chemical factory, as if nature tucked a guardian into a spined and stubborn flowerhead. Psyllium seeds show that medicine can begin with fiber. Not every useful medicinal plant works through dramatic chemistry that races to the nerves or heart. Psyllium is fascinating for the opposite reason. Its power comes from mucilage, a form of soluble fiber in the seed husk that swells when mixed with water. That swelling changes everything. It can soften stool, help regulate bowel movements, and even influence cholesterol and blood sugar by altering how material moves through the digestive tract. The beauty of psyllium is that it turns something almost humble into something medically important. There is no glamorous flower, no intoxicating scent, and no legendary poison to make it famous. It works through bulk, water, timing, and physical transformation inside the gut. That makes it feel almost architectural. The remedy is not a sharp chemical strike, but a change in texture and flow. In psyllium, medicine begins with structure itself, proving that healing can come not only from potency, but from a seed's ability to hold water. Senna leaves reveal how plants can powerfully stimulate the bowels. Senna is one of those medicinal plants that makes a person realize just how forcefully a leaf can act on the body. Its leaves and pods contain compounds called senosides, which help trigger bowel movement by stimulating activity in the intestines. That may sound simple, but the effect can be dramatic enough to make the plant memorable after a single dose. For centuries, constipation has been more than a small inconvenience. It can become painful, exhausting, and deeply disruptive, which is why remedies that reliably move the bowels earned such enduring value. Senna became one of the most famous. Yet it also carries a lesson in limits. A plant strong enough to push the gut into action is a plant that demands respect. That tension is part of its fascination. What looks like a modest cluster of leaflets can set powerful internal machinery into motion, reminding us that botanical medicine is sometimes direct, forceful, and impossible to dismiss. Clove oil can numb pain with surprising strength for a spice. Cloves sit in kitchens around the world looking warm, festive, and familiar. Yet the oil inside them can have a startling medical effect. Much of that power comes from eugenol, a compound with analgesic and antiseptic properties that made clove oil famous in dentistry and home remedies for tooth pain. The contrast is what makes it so captivating. This is a dried flower bud used in cakes, curries, and mulled drinks, and yet when its concentrated oil meets an aching tooth or irritated gum, it can bring genuine numbness. Suddenly, the spice jar feels less domestic and far more dramatic. There is also something ancient about the experience. Before modern dental anesthetics, people already knew that clove could blunt suffering in the mouth, which is one of the sharpest and most immediate forms of pain. A tiny bud, dark and rigid and aromatic, becomes a reminder that culinary plants often carry medical force hidden beneath their familiar flavor. Cinnamon was treasured not only for flavor, but for healing too. For much of history, cinnamon was more than a pleasant taste. It was luxury, mystery, trade, and medicine bound together in curled strips of fragrant bark. People prized it for warming the body, aiding digestion, sweetening bitter remedies, and preserving food with the help of its aromatic chemistry. That combination made cinnamon unusually powerful in cultural imagination. It did not belong only to healers or only to cooks. It moved through temples, kitchens, markets, and medical texts alike. The bark itself seems almost theatrical, rolled into quills that release scent the moment they are broken. Behind that fragrance lie compounds such as cinnamaldehyde, which helped explain why this spice felt active rather than merely decorative. Its history is also shaped by distance and desire. Whole trade routes strained toward sources of cinnamon because what smelled delightful also seemed valuable to health. Few medicinal plants show so clearly how healing, appetite, and global commerce can intertwine. Saffron has been studied for mood, memory, and remarkable chemistry. Saffron begins as one of the most labor-intensive plant products on Earth, gathered thread by thread from the stigmas of crocus flowers. That rarity alone gives it an aura, but the real fascination lies in the chemistry packed into those crimson strands. Compounds such as crozin and safranel contribute to its color, aroma, and growing scientific interest in effects related to mood, memory, and neurological function. What makes saffron so memorable is the sense of concentration. An entire field of flowers yields only a tiny amount, yet that tiny amount has been treasured for centuries as medicine, dye, perfume, and food. It feels almost impossible that something so delicate could carry such weight in human culture. But it does. Saffron seems to gather luxury and pharmacology into the same thread. Held in the hand, it looks fragile. Studied in the lab, it becomes complex. In history, it has long stood at the border where beauty becomes medicine. Lavender became beloved because scent alone can alter human experience. Lavender shows that a medicinal plant does not always need to be swallowed to have power. Sometimes the root is the nose, and sometimes that is enough to change the body's state. The aroma of lavender has long been linked with calm, rest, and relief from tension, which is remarkable when you think about it. A drifting scent, invisible and weightless, can influence mood, memory, and the sense of physical ease. That is part of why lavender became so beloved in sleep preparations, bath blends, linens, oils, and gardens planted close to doorways and windows. The plant turns air itself into a vehicle for medicine. Its effect is subtle, yet deeply human. Smell reaches into emotional centers of the brain with unusual directness, and lavender seems to have found a permanent place there. A field of purple blooms is beautiful, but its greater wonder may be that fragrance alone can help shift a person towards softness, rest, and relief. Rosemary was tied to memory long before scientists tested the idea. For centuries, rosemary carried an old reputation as a plant of remembrance. It appeared in ceremonies, poetry, and domestic custom as a symbol linked to memory, loyalty, and mental clarity. That symbolic life would already make it interesting, but what makes it truly captivating is that later researchers began testing whether the plant might, in some circumstances, influence attention and memory in measurable ways. That does not make the old folklore automatically correct in every detail, yet it creates a thrilling overlap between tradition and experiment. Somehow, long before controlled studies, people sensed a connection worth repeating. The plant itself seems suited to that role. It is sharp in scent, bracing, and difficult to ignore. Nothing like a bland herb fading quietly into the background. Rosemary announces itself. Perhaps that vividness helped build its reputation. Or perhaps the chemistry really did leave an impression. Either way, it remains one of the most intriguing cases where symbolism and science appear to glance at each other. Sage gained its name from a reputation for wisdom and healing. Few herbs wear their history so openly as sage. Even its name carries the echo of healing, wisdom, and esteem, reflecting how deeply people respected it across European and Mediterranean traditions. Sage was used for sore throats, mouth problems, sweating, digestion, and general strengthening, which gave it the kind of broad reputation that turns an herb into almost a household institution. Yet what makes sage memorable is not only utility. It is the way language itself rose around the plant. To call someone sage is to call them wise. That overlap between herb and human quality suggests how thoroughly this plant entered cultural imagination. And it is not hard to see why. Crush a leaf, and the aroma is immediately strong, almost authoritative, as though the plant is declaring its presence rather than waiting politely to be noticed. In sage, flavor, medicine, and metaphor fused together. It became not just a remedy, but a symbol of sound judgment growing from the soil. Thyme hides strong aromatic compounds in tiny glands on its leaves. At a glance, thyme seems delicate, almost miniature, with its small leaves and low growth. But under magnification, those leaves reveal secret stores of aromatic oil tucked into tiny glands. Inside are compounds such as thymol and carvacrol, which help explain the plant's strong scent and its long history in remedies for coughs, throats, and preservation. That hidden architecture is part of the wonder. A leaf so small you could overlook it entirely turns out to be packed with concentrated chemistry. The plant feels modest until it is warmed, crushed, or steeped, and then suddenly the room fills with its presence. Thyme is a perfect example of how medicinal power can be tucked into minute structures the eye barely notices. It is a herb of tiny scale and large effect. In each leaf, little reservoirs wait for pressure or heat to set them free, turning a creeping culinary herb into something far more potent than its size suggests. Tea plants produce caffeine as a defense, yet humans turned it useful. Caffeine did not evolve to help people wake up for work, study late, or hold conversation over steaming cups. In the tea plant, it likely began as part of a defense strategy, discouraging insects and shaping the ecology around the plant itself. That is what makes tea so fascinating. Humans took a chemical weapon and turned it into one of the world's most beloved mental tools. In every cup, there is that old botanical tension between protection and adaptation. Yet tea adds another layer because it does not deliver caffeine alone. It also carries compounds like L-theanine, which may help shape the experience into something more balanced and steady than a simple jolt. That pairing helped make tea not just a stimulant, but a ritual. Across China, Japan, India, Britain, and far beyond, this defensive plant chemistry became part of civilization's rhythms. A leaf built to guard itself became central to focus, conversation, hospitality, and entire ways of life. Coffee began as a plant stimulant before it became a global ritual. Before coffee was ceremony, commerce, and daily habit, it was a plant carrying caffeine in its seeds. That chemical likely served ecological functions for the plant, yet humans discovered in it something irresistible, an increase in alertness, energy, and mental sharpness strong enough to build cultures around. The story of coffee is remarkable because the medicine came first, even when people did not use that word. A stimulating berry seed changed how people prayed, worked, traded, traveled, wrote, and gathered. Coffee houses became centers of conversation and political thought because a plant had learned how to keep insects wary and humans awake. The sensation itself is part of the fascination. Few medicinal plants announce their effects so quickly and so clearly. A cup goes down, and the world feels different. Thought quickens. Fatigue loosens. The body tilts toward action. From mounting shrub to global ritual, coffee shows how plant chemistry can move from biology into the shape of civilization itself. Cocoa contains plant compounds that can influence mood and blood flow. Cocoa is often treated as comfort, indulgence, or luxury, but beneath that familiar pleasure lies a surprisingly active plant chemistry. The seeds of the cacao tree contain flavonols, theobromine, and smaller amounts of caffeine, all of which contribute to its effects on circulation, alertness, and the subtle lift many people associate with cacao. Chocolate. That makes cocoa fascinating because it occupies such an intimate place in human emotion. It is given as a gift, used in celebration, and reached for in moments of fatigue or sadness, and some of that pull may be more than cultural habit. The plant itself carries compounds capable of shaping experience. Even its bitterness matters, because what becomes sweet and velvety in chocolate begins as a more austere seed full of defensive chemistry. There is something enchanting in that transformation. A tropical plant turns bitterness into pleasure, and at the same time delivers molecules that can influence how the body feels and how the mind responds. Tobacco was once used medicinally before its harms became tragically clear. Tobacco's story is one of the clearest warnings in medicinal plant history. Indigenous peoples in the Americas used it in complex ceremonial and medicinal contexts long before Europeans encountered it. Later, in Europe and elsewhere, tobacco was promoted for an astonishing range of ailments, from headaches to respiratory complaints to plague. That sounds almost unbelievable now, which is exactly why the story matters. At first, the plant's immediate effects on the body and mind made it seem powerful, even miraculous. Nicotine acts quickly, changes sensation, and leaves no doubt that something is happening. But over time, the deeper truth emerged with devastating clarity. Dependence, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and enormous public suffering turned one of the world's most influential plant medicines into one of its most tragic examples of harm. The fascination of tobacco lies in that reversal. A plant, once praised as remedy, became a global lesson in how seductive chemistry can mislead human judgment on a catastrophic scale. Cannabis has a long medical history far older than modern debate. Modern arguments about cannabis can make it seem like a new subject, but its medical history reaches back thousands of years. In different cultures, it has been used for pain, sleep, appetite, ritual, inflammation, and altered states, which already makes it one of the most historically persistent medicinal plants. What gives the story real depth is the unusual way its compounds interact with the human body. Cannabinoids speak to an internal signaling system involved in pain, mood, memory, appetite, and much more, which helps explain why the plant has such a broad and controversial reputation. It is not a simple herb with one neat use. It is a pharmacological world of its own. That complexity is part of the reason it continues to provoke fascination, law, argument, and research all at once. Long before parliaments and headlines, people had already recognized that this plant could strongly reshape human experience. The debate is modern. The relationship is ancient. Poppy, willow, and foxglove show how plants reshaped modern pharmacology. If you wanted 3 plants to prove that the modern drug world grew partly from botanical roots, you could hardly choose better than poppy, willow, and foxglove. One transformed pain relief. One helped inspire aspirin. One altered the treatment of heart failure with astonishing specificity. Together they show that medicinal plants did not merely decorate the early history of medicine. They helped build the conceptual foundations of pharmacology itself. From them came lessons about dose, purity, extraction, toxicity, and mechanism, the very language modern drug science depends on. That is why these plants feel so important. Each one forced medicine to become more precise. It was no longer enough to say that a plant seemed useful. Researchers and physicians had to ask what compound acted, how strongly it acted, and where safety ended. In that sense, these species were not only sources of remedies, they were tutors that pushed medicine toward a more exact and modern understanding of chemical power. Aspirin's story began in folk remedies long before factory tablets. Long before aspirin came wrapped in foil or stacked in pharmacy aisles, people were already using willow and other salicylate-rich plants to ease pain and fever. That older history matters because it shows how modern medicine often begins with repeated human notice rather than sudden invention. A bark chewed, a decoction brewed, a pattern remembered. These small acts laid the path toward one of the most famous drugs on Earth. Later, chemists refined the chemistry, improved tolerability, and turned an old remedy into acetyl salicylic acid. But the beginning was much less industrial and much more intimate. It lived in tradition and trial. That continuity is what makes aspirin's story so satisfying. The distance from riverside tree to mass-produced tablet seems enormous, yet it is bridged by attention across generations. A modern medicine can still carry the outline of its botanical ancestor. In every aspirin tablet there is a faint echo of bark, bitterness, and older hands at work. Quinine changed colonial history because it made malarial regions more survivable. Some medicinal plants altered not only health, but geopolitics. Quinine is one of the clearest examples. By helping treat malaria, it changed the practical limits of where soldiers, traders, missionaries, and colonial administrators could survive for long periods. Regions once dreaded as deadly to outsiders became more accessible once quinine use spread, and that had consequences far beyond medicine. Expansion, occupation, extraction, and control all became easier when one of the great biological barriers to empire was partly lowered. That does not make quinine a villain. It makes it historically powerful. The same bark chemistry that saved lives also altered the shape of power. Few remedies reveal so starkly that medicine is never only biological. Once a treatment affects survival on a large scale, it can change history itself. In the case of quinine, a molecule from a South American tree helped redraw human movement in tropical regions, proving that a medicinal plant can influence maps as well as bodies. Curare helped hunters first, then transformed surgery by relaxing muscles. Curare begins in the forest, on arrow tips used by indigenous hunters in South America to bring down animals by causing paralysis. That origin alone is gripping, but the later medical turn is even more extraordinary. Once scientists understood how curare-like compounds interfere with communication between nerves and muscles, those same effects helped open a new chapter in anesthesia and surgery. Surgeons could use muscle relaxation to perform procedures with greater control, which changed what operations were possible. It is hard to imagine a more dramatic transformation of purpose. A hunting poison became a medical tool. The mechanism remained the same, yet human intention changed completely. That is one of the deepest themes in medicinal plant history. Molecules do not arrive labeled as good or evil. They simply act. Humans decide whether the action becomes weapon, remedy, or both. Curare makes that truth unforgettable. Forest knowledge, pharmacology, and surgical progress all converge in one of medicine's most startling reversals. Pilocarpine from jabarandi helped doctors treat certain forms of glaucoma. Jabarandi may not be as famous as poppy or willow, yet its contribution to medicine is strikingly precise. From this South American plant came pilocarpine, a compound that affects the parasympathetic nervous system and found an important role in treating certain forms of glaucoma by helping reduce pressure in the eye. That is fascinating because vision feels so fragile and so precious. A plant compound reaching into that system to help preserve sight has an immediacy few medical stories can match. Pilocarpine also causes sweating and salivation, which reveals how interconnected the body is once chemistry begins to act on nerve signaling. One molecule can pull on several threads at once. That complexity gives jabarandi's story real power. A leaf from a tropical plant became part of the fight against blindness, and in doing so, showed that medicinal plants do not only offer broad, comforting effects. Sometimes they deliver highly targeted help in one of the body's most delicate organs. Ephedra gave rise to stimulant drugs that changed respiratory medicine. Ephedra is one of the clearest examples of a plant whose chemistry leapt out of traditional use and straight into modern drug history. For centuries, species of ephedra were used in parts of Asia for breathing troubles, especially when the chest felt tight and air seemed hard to pull in. Later, scientists isolated ephedrine, a compound that stimulates the body in ways that can open airways, raise blood pressure, and sharpen alertness. That changed respiratory medicine because it gave doctors a tool that could act fast when breathing became difficult. It also changed the broader story of stimulants, since ephedrine helped inspire later drugs with powerful effects on the nervous system. What makes this so gripping is the speed and force of the chemistry. A dry-looking desert plant, sparse and almost austere, turned out to carry molecules strong enough to alter medicine, sports, military history, and public health debates all at once. Rauwolfia provided compounds that helped lower blood pressure and calm minds. Some medicinal plants changed medicine not by dramatic pain relief or infection control, but by reaching into the hidden systems of mood and circulation. Rauwolfia is one of those plants. From its roots came reserpine and related compounds, which helped lower blood pressure and also found use in psychiatry during an important period of medical history. That alone makes it remarkable. One plant, rooted in traditional South Asian medicine, ended up influencing both cardiology and the treatment of serious mental illness. The story carries a strange kind of depth because the effects were not simple. These compounds worked by altering chemical signaling in the body and brain, which meant they could calm, slow, and steady, yet also bring difficult side effects. That tension is part of what makes Rauwolfia unforgettable. It showed that plant medicine could reach deep into the machinery of thought and blood flow, changing medicine's ambitions about what chemistry might control. Podophyllum inspired important medicines by stopping cells at a critical moment. Podophyllum, sometimes called mayapple, does not look like a plant that would influence one of medicine's most serious fields. It grows with an almost woodland modesty, tucked into shade, yet inside it lies chemistry capable of interfering with cell division. That fact gave rise to compounds and drug development pathways that became important in cancer treatment. The fascination here lies in timing. Cells must pass through precise stages when they divide, and podophyllum-derived chemistry can stop that process at a crucial moment, halting the machinery before it completes its work. That is an extraordinary thing for a plant to offer. Cancer depends on uncontrolled growth, so any compound that can interrupt that cycle becomes a subject of intense interest. In this case, a forest plant helped reveal that control point. The broader lesson is powerful. Nature sometimes reaches into the most intimate mechanics of life itself, and from that intrusion, medicine learns how to fight disease. The rosy periwinkle was discovered through a search beyond hospitals. Some of medicine's most important discoveries did not begin in a gleaming research center. They began because someone looked beyond hospitals and into gardens, traditional practices and living landscapes. The rosy periwinkle is a perfect example. Researchers did not find its remarkable compounds by staring only at already approved medicines. They found them by exploring a plant with a history of traditional use and asking what hidden chemistry might be inside. That shift in direction matters. He shows that discovery often depends on curiosity that moves outward, toward overlooked plants and knowledge systems not yet translated into laboratory language. The periwinkle's later role in cancer treatment gives the story real emotional force, but the beginning is just as compelling. A humble flower had to be noticed, collected, tested, and taken seriously. That path reminds us that medical breakthroughs are not always waiting in clinics. Sometimes they are growing in plain sight beyond the walls of modern medicine. Many plant drugs were found by following traditional healers, not accidents. There is a romantic myth that great medical discoveries simply happen by chance, as if researchers stumble into miracles by luck alone. In reality, many important plant-based drugs were found because scientists paid attention to traditional healers who already knew which species mattered. That changes the story completely. Discovery becomes less about accident and more about listening. Healers observed who improved, which plant part worked, what season mattered, and how preparation changed results. Those clues gave researchers a starting point far more focused than random screening. This is one of the most fascinating truths in medicinal plant history because it reveals how knowledge moves. It does not always travel from laboratory to village. Very often, it moves the other way first. A local remedy, carried in practice and memory, becomes the lead that opens a modern pharmacological pathway. Behind many famous compounds stands not luck, but generations of close human attention to the living world. Modern laboratories often begin with clues carried in oral traditions. Not all medical knowledge arrives in books, databases, or formal records. Some of the most valuable clues begin as stories, instructions, cautions, and remembered practices passed from one person to another. Oral traditions carry details about which bark is too strong for children, which root must be dug in a certain season, or which leaf works only after drying. To a laboratory, those details can become research questions. That is what makes this subject so captivating. A spoken tradition, shaped by memory and repeated use, can guide scientists toward compounds worth isolating and effects worth testing. The lab may later measure, purify, and standardize, but the first direction often comes from people who never wrote a paper. There is something profoundly human in that chain. A grandmother's warning, a healer's recipe, or a community's long practice can become the thread that leads to modern investigation. Science may use instruments, but sometimes it begins with someone remembering exactly what worked. Scientists can test thousands of plants, yet most species remain unexplored. The scale of what remains unknown is almost dizzying. Scientists can screen plants for antibacterial effects, anti-inflammatory activity, anti-cancer potential, antiviral compounds, and countless other properties. Yet the number of species on Earth is so large that most have never been studied in depth for medicinal use. That means the map of known plant medicine is still full of blank spaces. A few famous species dominate attention, but beyond them lies an enormous botanical frontier. Some plants have never been tested at all. Others have been examined only for one kind of activity, while their other possible effects remain untouched. This creates a sense of thrilling incompleteness. Even now, with advanced instruments and vast chemical libraries, humanity has not come close to reading the full medicinal potential of the plant world. A hillside, wetland, or remote valley may hold species whose chemistry no one has ever properly asked about. The unknown is not small. It is botanical in scale. Rainforests may hold future medicines hidden in species without common names. One of the most powerful ideas in this entire field is that future medicines may belong to plants most people have never heard of. In rainforests, countless species live in intense competition with insects, fungi, bacteria, and one another, which drives them to produce unusual chemistry. Some do not even have widely known common names outside scientific circles. They are simply part of the green abundance, unnoticed by the wider world. Yet that is exactly what makes them so compelling. A nameless understory shrub or an obscure canopy vine may contain compounds that someday alter treatment for infection, inflammation, cancer, or disease we have not even solved yet. The tragedy is that habitat can vanish before those questions are ever asked. A forest can be cut, burned, or fragmented, and with it disappear a chemical library never opened. In that sense, rainforest conservation is not only about beauty or biodiversity. It may also be about protecting medicines that remain unnamed and unread. The ocean also has medicinal plants, including chemically rich seaweeds. When people hear medicinal plants, they often imagine forests, meadows, roots, and flowering herbs. But the ocean holds botanical and plant-like sources of medicine too, especially seaweeds and marine algae with striking chemical richness. These organisms live in salt, current, light extremes, grazing pressure, and microbial competition. So they produce compounds that can be very different from those found on land. That alone makes them fascinating. Kelp, red algae, brown algae, and green algae, and not just passive marine scenery. They are chemical strategists, making substances that help them defend, attach, reproduce, and survive. Humans have used seaweeds for centuries in food, iodine-rich remedies, wound applications, and other practical roles, while scientists continue studying their broader pharmacological promise. The setting gives the whole story a fresh sense of wonder. Medicinal botany does not end at the shoreline. It continues beneath the waves, where drifting forests and rocky tide pools hold another branch of the planet's healing chemistry. Lichens and fungi often blur the boundary between plant lore and medicine. For much of history, people did not always separate plants, fungi, and lichens in the strict ways modern biology does. They were gathered, named, traded, and used together within broader traditions of natural healing. That is what makes this area so intriguing. Lichens are partnerships between fungi and photosynthetic partners, while fungi are a kingdom of their own, yet both often slipped into plant lore because they grew in the same landscapes and entered the same remedies. Iceland moss, reishi, chaga, and many others show how that blurred boundary shaped medicine. The old categories were practical rather than taxonomic. If something soothed a cough, eased a wound, or restored strength, it belonged in the healer's world regardless of what modern classification would later call it. There is something beautiful in that. Human beings noticed effects before they knew evolutionary relationships. Medicine began with usefulness, and only later did science redraw the borders of the living world. Some remedies depend on whole plant mixtures, not a single molecule. Modern drug discovery often loves a clear star, one purified compound with one named structure and one measurable mechanism. Yet many traditional remedies work as mixtures, where several compounds within the same plant may contribute to the final effect together. That possibility gives medicinal plants a depth that single-molecule thinking does not always capture. One substance may improve absorption, another may soften irritation, a third may carry the main biological action, while others stabilize the blend or shift how long it lasts. In practice, this means the whole extract can sometimes behave differently from any isolated ingredient alone. That is not mystical. It is chemistry and combination. The challenge is that such mixtures are harder to study with clean simplicity, which makes them scientifically frustrating and fascinating at the same time. A remedy may succeed not because one hero molecule does everything, but because the plant evolved an internal orchestra, and medicine is hearing the effect of the full ensemble. One plant can contain hundreds of compounds acting at once. It is easy to speak of a medicinal plant as though it contains one important substance and little else, but that is rarely how nature works. A single leaf, bark, or root can carry hundreds of compounds, some abundant, some faint, some biologically active, some still unknown. Alkaloids, flavonoids, terpenes, tannins, glycosides, acids, oils, and pigments may all exist together in shifting balance. That makes every medicinal plant feel more like a chemical community than a single medicine bottle. When people use a plant preparation, they are often encountering that whole community at once. Some ingredients may help. Some may irritate. Some may change how the others behave. This is one reason botanical medicine remains so captivating. It is layered, crowded, and full of internal relationships we do not fully understand. A plant is not a neat packet of one answer. It is a miniature world of chemistry, and that world may be acting on the body in several directions at once. That chemical complexity makes medicinal plants both promising and hard to study. The very feature that makes medicinal plants so exciting is also what makes them scientifically difficult. Because a plant may contain many active compounds rather than one, researchers have to ask harder questions. Which ingredient matters most? Do several work together? Does one only become useful after digestion changes it? Does the extract vary by season or storage? Suddenly, the path to clear evidence becomes tangled. Yet that same complexity is exactly why plants remain promising. They may offer multi-layered effects that a single synthetic molecule does not easily reproduce. This is why medicinal plants sit in such an interesting space between tradition and laboratory science. They invite discovery, but they resist simplification. A plant extract can look messy on paper and still prove valuable in practice. That tension is not a weakness of the field. It is part of its identity. The chemistry is rich enough to intrigue medicine and complicated enough to keep scientists humble long after the first promising result. Standardizing a plant remedy can be harder than making a synthetic drug. A synthetic drug can be built to match the same structure again and again, with impressive consistency. A plant does not behave like that. It grows in weather, soil, shade, stress, altitude, and time. Its chemistry shifts with those conditions, which means turning a medicinal herb into a reliably standardized product can be astonishingly difficult. That is what makes botanical medicine so challenging from a manufacturing perspective. You are not just producing a pill. You are trying to capture a living organism's chemistry in a repeatable form while nature keeps changing the recipe. Even once harvested, drying, storage, extraction, and transport can continue altering the final result. This is why standardization in herbal medicine often becomes a long technical struggle rather than a simple industrial task. The irony is striking. People assume natural remedies are simpler because they come from plants. In reality, a forest herb can be harder to reproduce consistently than a molecule designed from scratch in a laboratory. The same herb sold in different shops may not match exactly. Two bottles with the same plant name can create the illusion of sameness, yet what is inside may differ more than many people realize. One product might use leaf, another root. One may be harvested young, another mature. One may be extracted with alcohol, another with water. Storage conditions, drying methods, growing region, and even accidental contamination can all change the chemistry. That means shoppers may believe they are buying the same remedy, when in truth they are buying noticeably different versions of it. This is one of the most practical and fascinating realities of medicinal plants. Unlike fully standardized pharmaceuticals, herbs remain tied to agricultural and processing variability in ways that are hard to erase. The label gives a name. The plant's life history gives the actual chemistry. That gap matters because it shapes both effectiveness and safety. A medicinal herb is never just a word on packaging. It is the sum of where it grew, how it was handled, and what was truly preserved. Harvest time can change how strong a medicinal plant becomes. Plants are not chemically identical from spring to autumn, or from bud to flower to seed. Their inner composition rises and falls with growth, reproduction, stress, and storage patterns, which means the moment of harvest can strongly affect medicinal potency. A leaf cut too early may not yet contain the same balance of compounds it would later. A root lifted at the wrong season may have already spent its stored chemistry on new growth. Flowers may be most valuable just before they fully open, while seeds may need complete maturity to hold their strongest character. This sensitivity to timing makes medicinal plants feel almost like music. Catch the right moment, and the effect is full. Miss it, and something important is lost. Traditional healers understood this intimately, which is why calendars, moon phases, seasons, and plant stages often mattered so much. The medicine was not only in the species, it was also in the timing, when the plant had become most fully itself. Wild plants and cultivated plants can produce noticeably different chemistry. A plant growing untended in the wild faces competition, poor soil, shifting weather, hungry insects, disease pressure, and irregular water. A cultivated plant may receive richer ground, consistent care, fewer threats, and selection for traits humans prefer. Those different lives can create noticeably different chemistry. That is why wild and farmed medicinal herbs do not always behave as twins. The wild plant may produce more defensive compounds because it has been tested harder. The cultivated one may be milder, larger, cleaner, or more predictable, yet not always as chemically intense. This difference gives medicinal botany a real ecological drama. The remedy is shaped not only by species, but by biography. A plant carries the record of how it lived. Was it sheltered or challenged? Was it crowded, browsed, stressed, or carefully tended? Those conditions can echo through the final medicine. In that sense, using a medicinal plant is partly using the story of the environment that formed it. A medicinal herb grown at altitude may differ from one grown at sea level. Altitude changes a plant's world in ways that can ripple all the way into its medicinal profile. Higher elevations bring stronger ultraviolet light, cooler temperatures, thinner air, sharper daily swings, and often different soils and microbial partners. A plant growing there may respond by producing more pigments, more aromatic oils or other protective compounds that help it manage that harsher environment. The same species near sea level may look similar enough, yet carry a noticeably different inner chemistry. That makes mountains feel almost like natural laboratories, where pressure and exposure quietly rewrite botanical medicine. For growers and herbal traditions, this mattered more than many outsiders realized. Place was never just scenery. It was part of the remedy itself. A herb from a high valley could develop a reputation distinct from one grown on lowland farms, not because of superstition, but because its life conditions were genuinely different. Altitude then becomes another hidden ingredient in the medicine. Some plants are medicinal only after careful preparation removes their toxins. Not every useful plant is safe in its raw state. Some are medicinal only because people learned how to process them with extraordinary care. Soaking, boiling, fermenting, pounding, roasting, or repeated washing can reduce toxins, remove bitterness, or transform dangerous chemistry into something usable. That makes these plants especially fascinating because the medicine does not exist in nature in a ready-made form. It exists in a partnership between plant and human skill. Without the right preparation, the result may be ineffective or harmful. With it, the same species can become nourishing, healing, or at least safely manageable. This is one of the clearest signs that traditional plant medicine often involved real technical sophistication. People were not simply swallowing whatever they found. They were learning complex procedures that allowed them to work with plants nature had armed. In those cases, the remedy is not just the plant. It is the knowledge of exactly how to tame it. Cassava reminds us that staple plants can heal and harm. Cassava feeds hundreds of millions of people, which already makes it one of the most important plants on Earth. Yet hidden inside many varieties are cyanogenic compounds that can release cyanide if the root is not processed properly. That fact gives cassava an unusual power as a symbol. It shows that the line between food and toxin can run straight through one of humanity's great staple crops. Communities that depend on cassava developed methods such as grating, soaking, fermenting, drying, and thorough cooking to make it safe. Those methods are not optional details. They are the difference between nourishment and danger. That is what makes cassava so compelling in a discussion of medicinal plants. It reminds us that plant knowledge is not only about rare herbs and dramatic cures. It is also about survival through correct handling of everyday staples. A root that sustains nations can also punish carelessness, proving again that the plant world always asks for respect. Traditional healers often knew which plant parts were safest to use. A medicinal plant is rarely one uniform substance from top to bottom. The leaf may soothe while the root irritates. The fruit may nourish while the seed poisons. Traditional healers understood that difference with a level of precision that still feels astonishing. They knew which bark should be stripped and which should be left alone. They knew whether a plant belonged in the mouth, on the skin, or nowhere near either one. In many cases, that knowledge was the difference between healing and real danger. A plant might be famous for its benefits if only one part could be safely prepared for ordinary use. Everything else required caution or complete avoidance. That is why this old knowledge feels so rich. It was never only about naming a species. It was about knowing the body of the plant almost the way a butcher knows an animal or a musician knows an instrument. Safety lived in detail, not in guesswork. Smell, color, and taste once helped healers judge plant quality. Before chromatography, mass spectrometry, and laboratory assays, healers still had to decide whether a plant was fresh potent, weak, spoiled, or wrongly gathered. So they used the senses with extraordinary care. A strong scent might suggest abundant aromatic oils. A faded color could hint at age or poor storage. A bitter taste might signal active chemistry, while a stale or moldy note could warn that the remedy had lost its value or become unsafe. This was not superstition. It was sensory quality control built from long observation. A healer handling bundles of dried herbs learned to read them almost like a language, by the brightness of a root, the sharpness of a leaf, the feel of the texture between the fingers. That skill is fascinating because it shows how knowledge can become embodied. The eyes, nose, tongue, and hands became instruments. Long before machines measured plant quality, human attention was already doing the work. Bees, birds, and insects can influence the chemistry of medicinal plants. A medicinal plant does not make its chemistry in isolation. It lives inside a web of visits, bites, pollination, stress, and response. Bees may change how a plant allocates energy by ensuring successful reproduction. Leaf-chewing insects can trigger fresh defensive chemistry. Birds that damage fruit or disperse seeds can shift the plant's timing and survival strategy. In some species, pollination itself alters hormone patterns that ripple through developing tissues. That makes the chemistry of medicinal plants feel more alive and relational than many people imagine. The remedy is not only shaped by soil and weather, it is shaped by encounters. Every nibble, sting, landing, and feeding attempt can become part of the plant's story. That idea is deeply compelling because it means the medicine may partly reflect the wider ecosystem around it. A plant in a quiet field and the same species in a buzzing, grazed, insect-heavy habitat may not be carrying exactly the same inner world. Soil microbes may help medicinal plants produce some of their key compounds. The ground beneath a medicinal plant is not just dirt. It is a crowded biological society full of bacteria, fungi, and microscopic interactions that can shape how the plant grows and what chemistry it produces. Some soil microbes help roots absorb nutrients more efficiently. Others trigger stress responses or alter hormone signaling in ways that can ripple into the production of secondary compounds, the very chemicals people may later prize as medicinal. That makes the underground world feel almost magical. A leaf's potency may partly depend on invisible partners living around the roots, partners the eye never sees, but the plant is in constant conversation with. This is one reason plants grown in different soils can behave so differently. The chemistry is not simply inside the plant as a sealed private possession. It is partly negotiated with the living earth. In medicinal botany, even the unseen microbes underfoot may be quiet contributors to the remedy above ground. Fungi living inside plants can quietly shape their healing chemistry. Not all fungi attack plants. Some live inside them in subtle, often hidden partnerships as endophytes, dwelling within stems, leaves, or roots without obvious signs of disease. These quiet residents can change the chemistry of the plant in remarkable ways. They may produce compounds of their own, influence the plant's defenses, or help trigger metabolic pathways that alter what ends up in the harvested material. In some cases, the line between plant chemistry and fungal contribution becomes wonderfully blurred. That makes medicinal plants even more fascinating than they first appear. A remedy gathered from one species may partly owe its properties to microscopic companions tucked inside its tissues. The plant is not always acting alone. It can be more like a living collaboration. Once you realize that, the old picture of a medicinal herb becomes much richer. What seems like one organism may actually be a community, and the healing chemistry may be coming from that hidden partnership. Some medicinal plants protect themselves with compounds that target human nerves. One reason medicinal plants can feel so dramatic is that many of them interact directly with the nervous system. Compounds evolved to repel insects or grazing animals, often do so by altering signaling in nerves and muscles. And because the basic chemistry of life is shared across many creatures, those same compounds can affect us too. That is why certain plants can numb pain, sharpen alertness, distort perception, calm spasms, or cause paralysis. The nervous system is electrical, fast, and exquisitely sensitive, so when plant chemistry reaches it, the effects can feel immediate and unforgettable. This is what makes such plants both medically exciting and potentially dangerous. A leaf or seed is no longer just a passive object. It becomes a molecular key reaching into the body's wiring. That image has real force. Plants standing rooted in silence may still be armed with chemistry capable of entering the human nervous system and changing experience in profound ways. Others affect the heart, liver, blood, or brain with startling precision. Some plant compounds do not act in a vague, general way. They reach specific organs and systems with almost unsettling precision. One may alter the rhythm or force of the heartbeat, and other may influence liver enzymes and the way the body handles chemicals. Others may thin the blood, change blood sugar, or affect neurotransmitters involved in thought and mood. That precision is one of the reasons medicinal plants continue to inspire such respect. Their chemistry is not random. It can be targeted enough to feel almost designed, even though it was shaped by evolution for completely different purposes. The result is both beautiful and sobering. A flower, bark, or root can reach into one of the body's most critical systems and alter its behavior in meaningful ways. That is why dosage, preparation, and caution matter so much. When a medicinal plant works, it may be working in the deepest and most vital chambers of human biology. Plant molecules often fit human biology because life shares ancient chemistry. One of the deepest reasons medicinal plants can affect us at all is that life on Earth is related. Plants, fungi, animals, and microbes all arose from ancient biochemical ancestry. So many of the molecules and pathways that govern living systems are variations on old shared themes. That is why plant compounds can interact with human enzymes, receptors, membranes, and signaling systems in ways that are sometimes so effective. The chemistry feels foreign because it comes from another kingdom, yet it also feels strangely familiar because life has never been truly separate from itself. That idea gives medicinal plants a kind of cosmic intimacy. A compound made by a root to defend itself against being eaten may still fit the receptors in a human gut or brain, because both plant and person are built from the same deep history of carbon-based life. The plant world can touch us because, at the chemical level, we are distant relatives speaking an ancient molecular language. The line between food and medicine is often thinner than expected. Many of the plants people cook with every day also have long histories as remedies, which makes the boundary between dinner and medicine far less rigid than modern culture often assumes. Garlic, ginger, cinnamon, turmeric, peppermint, thyme, and many others have moved between kitchen and clinic for centuries without seeming out of place in either. That is what makes this subject so inviting. Healing does not always arrive in a pill bottle. Sometimes it is brewed into tea, stirred into soup, or ground into a spice blend. Of course, food is not automatically medicine in any grand sense, and medicine is not simply tasty food in disguise. But the overlap is real and historically important. Plants eaten for pleasure can also affect digestion, circulation, inflammation, mood, and microbial balance. Once you see that, the kitchen changes. It begins to look a little like an apothecary, and an ordinary meal begins to carry the shadow of older medicinal wisdom. A kitchen herb can become a laboratory subject with life-changing potential. There is something almost thrilling about the journey from chopping board to research bench. A herb that begins as seasoning, something tossed into a pan or steeped in hot water, can later attract serious scientific attention because its chemistry turns out to be far more powerful than anyone guessed. This transformation has happened again and again. Familiar plants become objects of careful measurement. Cell studies, animal models, clinical trials, and pharmaceutical interest. What makes that so compelling is the collapse of distance between ordinary life and cutting-edge science. The gap between a family recipe and a medical discovery is not always as wide as it looks. The same leaf that flavors dinner may contain compounds affecting inflammation, microbes, blood vessels, or the nervous system. That possibility gives everyday plants a kind of electric significance. A humble herb in a kitchen pot may one day move into a laboratory and become part of a story that changes human health. The search for new antibiotics often leads scientists back to plants. As antibiotic resistance grows, the old triumph of modern medicine feels less secure than it once did. Bacteria evolve, drugs lose strength, and infections that seemed manageable begin to grow dangerous again. In that search for new weapons, scientists often return to plants, not because plants replace antibiotics in a simple way, but because their chemical diversity remains extraordinary. Plants have spent millions of years defending themselves against microbial attack, which means they are full of compounds with antibacterial, antifungal, or synergistic potential. Some may kill microbes directly. Others may weaken defenses, disrupt biofilms, or help existing antibiotics work better. That possibility is what keeps plants so scientifically exciting. The answers to future infections may not lie only in new synthetic molecules. Some may begin in leaves, bark, seeds, or resins that evolved under pressure long before humans ever named bacteria. Once again, the living world that fed us may also help defend us. Drug-resistant diseases have renewed interest in ancient botanical knowledge. When modern medicine runs into resistance, old knowledge suddenly stops looking old. Drug-resistant infections, malaria strains that evolve around treatment, and other stubborn diseases have pushed researchers to look again at botanical traditions that were once dismissed too quickly. This renewed attention is fascinating because it is not simple nostalgia. It is born from necessity. If a disease stops responding well to familiar drugs, then clues preserved in traditional plant use become newly valuable. A remedy recorded in a classical text or kept alive in oral practice may point toward a compound, a combination, or a preparation method worth serious investigation. That does not mean every ancient remedy becomes a cure, but it does mean that the past remains pharmacologically relevant. Human beings have been testing plants against illness for a very long time. In moments of resistance and uncertainty, that long experiment becomes a source of leads, perspective, and sometimes real hope for the future. Conservation matters because an extinct plant can take its medicine with it. When a plant species disappears, the loss is not only visual or ecological. It may also be pharmacological. Every extinct species takes with it a unique chemistry shaped by evolution, and that chemistry may include compounds no human being ever had the chance to study. This gives conservation a special urgency in the world of medicinal plants. We are not only trying to save beautiful landscapes or protect biodiversity as an abstract good. We may also be protecting future treatments that have not yet been discovered. A vanished plant is not like a lost book that can be reprinted. Once the lineage is gone, its exact chemistry is gone with it. That finality is sobering. Somewhere in a threatened forest, wetland, or mountain slope, there may be a species holding molecules relevant to pain, infection, cancer, or disease we do not yet understand. If it disappears first, the medicine disappears too, silently and forever. Overharvesting has pushed some famous medicinal plants toward rarity. Success can become a threat in the world of medicinal plants. Once a species gains fame, demand may rise far beyond what wild populations can easily bear. Collectors dig roots, strip bark, cut branches, or remove whole plants faster than they can recover. Over time, abundance gives way to scarcity. This has happened to several well-known medicinal species, including ginseng and goldenseal in parts of North America, where popularity and commercial demand placed heavy pressure on natural populations. The tragedy is that the very qualities people admire can help drive the plant toward decline. A remedy becomes valuable, then vulnerable. This makes medicinal plant history feel almost tragic at times. Human need, trade, hope, and profit converge on a living species that cannot move away or replenish itself quickly enough. In those cases, healing and harm become entangled. The plant helps people, yet people may destroy the plant unless cultivation, restraint, and protection intervene in time. Climate change may alter the chemistry of medicinal plants worldwide. Climate change does not only threaten where medicinal plants grow. It may also change what they are chemically. Rising temperatures, shifting rainfall, stronger droughts, altered seasons, and increasing carbon dioxide can all affect how plants allocate energy and which compounds they produce. A herb that once yielded a familiar profile may grow differently under new conditions, with changes in potency, aroma, or active constituents. That possibility is deeply important because medicinal value often depends on those fine chemical balances. A plant may still survive in a warming world and yet become a different medicine from the one people knew. This gives climate change a very intimate dimension. It is not only about landscapes moving on maps. It is about remedies changing in the hand. Future healers may inherit the same species names, but not always the same chemistry. The medicine cabinet of the natural world may be quietly shifting already, leaf by leaf, under the pressure of a changing planet. Seed banks and botanical gardens now help protect future plant medicines. There is something profoundly hopeful in the idea that a seed vault or a living botanical collection can help protect medicines that have not yet been discovered. Seed banks preserve genetic material against loss, while botanical gardens maintain living specimens, research collections, and cultivation knowledge that might one day prove essential. Together they act like memory for the plant world. If habitats are destroyed or wild populations shrink, these collections may help keep a species from disappearing completely. That matters enormously for medicinal plants because preservation is not only about saving names in a catalogue. It is about protecting future access to chemistry, ancestry, and biological possibility. A seed tucked into cold storage today may one day grow into a plant that informs medicine decades from now. Botanical gardens, meanwhile, become more than beautiful public spaces. They are living archives, holding open the possibility that a rare herb or threatened tree will still be available when science is finally ready to ask the right question. Some medicinal plants travel globally, while others heal only in one region. Some medicinal plants become world travelers. They leave their native homes, enter trade routes, adapt to cultivation, and end up known across continents. Ginger, tea, cinnamon, and turmeric are examples of plants whose medical and culinary identities spread far beyond their origins. Others remain deeply local, tied to one climate, one language, one mountain range, or one cultural tradition. Their healing reputation may be immense within that region and almost unknown elsewhere. That contrast is one of the most beautiful things about medicinal botany. It shows both the portability and the rootedness of plant knowledge. Some remedies become global citizens. Others remain intimate to place, inseparable from the people and landscapes that first understood them. That local character matters. A regionally known plant may carry knowledge so specific that it resists translation into mass markets or simplified global categories. In that sense, medicinal plants tell two stories at once, one of travel and one of deep belonging. A remedy trusted in one culture may be unknown in another. The medicinal plant world is full of quiet surprises because healing traditions do not spread evenly. A remedy considered ordinary and dependable in one culture may be nearly invisible in another, not because it lacks value, but because history, language, trade, and worldview shaped different medical landscapes. One community may know a bark for fevers, a root for childbirth recovery, or a leaf for skin problems, while another community living far away has never heard of it. This is fascinating because it reveals how much medicine depends on culture as well as biology. Plants do not become remedies only by existing. They become remedies because people notice, test, remember, and teach. That process happens differently in different places. The result is a world full of parallel medical traditions, each carrying treasures the others may barely know. When those traditions meet, the exchange can be extraordinary. An unfamiliar plant may suddenly become the beginning of a completely new chapter in healing. Medicinal plants tell a human story of curiosity, survival, and careful observation. At the heart of all this chemistry, history, and discovery lies a human habit that may be even more remarkable than the plants themselves. People kept watching. They watched which leaf helped and which harmed. They noticed what happened after rain, after drying, after boiling, after mixing one plant with another. They remembered what eased pain, what lowered fever, what calmed a cough, and what should never be given twice. Over generations, that attention became tradition, trade, science, and medicine. This is why medicinal plants feel so emotionally powerful. They do not only tell us about nature. They tell us what human beings are like when survival depends on learning from the living world. Curious, patient, sometimes reckless, often ingenious. The story reaches from ancient firesides to modern laboratories without ever really breaking. A remedy in the hand is also a piece of human memory, a record of people who kept asking what this plant might do and refused to stop learning. The next major medicine may already be growing quietly in plain sight. That possibility is one of the most irresistible ideas in all of medicine. Somewhere right now, perhaps in a field, a roadside verge, a mountain forest, a wetland, or a botanical collection, there may be a plant carrying chemistry that could transform treatment for a major disease. It may look ordinary. It may have no reputation outside one small region. It may be dismissed as a weed, a shrub, or a species too common to notice. Yet hidden in its tissues could be a compound, or a combination of compounds, that one day changes the lives of millions. This is not fantasy. It has happened before, many times. That is what gives the subject its sense of living suspense. The story is not finished. Medicinal plants belong to the future as much as the past. The next great breakthrough may not begin with a machine or a patent. It may begin with someone finally paying attention to the right plant. And now, our journey through medicinal plants comes gently to a close. Tonight, we wandered through a world that has shaped human life for thousands upon thousands of years. We moved from ancient graves, market stalls, and healing traditions to forests filled with hidden chemistry and flowers carrying compounds powerful enough to change medicine forever. We saw that remedies have come from bark, roots, seeds, leaves, and resin. We saw that some plants soothe, some stimulate, some protect, and some demand great caution. And through it all, one idea kept returning. The green world around us is far more active, inventive, and mysterious than it first appears. Perhaps you're carrying with you the image of a willow by the water's edge, a foxglove rising tall in summer light, or some quiet forest plant holding a chemistry no one has fully understood yet. Perhaps it is the thought that the next great medicine may still be growing somewhere unnoticed, under rain, sun, and passing wind. And now, there is nothing more you need to do. Let all of it drift softly into the background. Let the facts loosen and settle. Let your breathing become slower and heavier. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. And allow your mind to rest in that old, comforting thought that healing has always been part of the Earth's story. If you enjoyed this sleepy journey, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, or leave a quiet thought below. It helps this channel find other wandering minds who might need a little calm at the end of the day. And if you happen to still be awake, there will be another video waiting for you on screen in just a moment. For now, let the day fall away. Let the dark grow softer around you. And let yourself drift. Sleep well and good night.